Hello, and welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Baines, and this is the place where you meet the storytellers behind the stories you love, and the ones you haven't discovered yet. If you're looking for fiction written from a male perspective, stories men can connect with, where romance is not the central theme, and where young men and women can get excited about clean, adventure-filled tales rooted in biblical principles, then you're in the right place. These are authors worth checking out. If this is your first time tuning in, I'm so glad that you found us. And if you're a returning listener, welcome back. Be sure to hit that follow button so you never miss an episode. Every like and comment means a lot. It's how we know that we're making a difference. I do my best to reply to every comment. It's always fascinating to me how a person becomes a Christian fiction author. What stimulates them? Why do they start doing that? This episode will not disappoint. So let's dive into this week's conversation. Well, Steve, I'd like to welcome you to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. And if you don't mind, would you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure, I'd be glad to. My name is Steve Forsythe. I live in East Liverpool, Ohio, but spend a great deal of my time at a church that I pastor in New Brighton, Pennsylvania. And
Really?
so, I shouldn't admit this on camera, but 68 years old. And so, finally getting around to some of those goals in life that you want to get to.
It seems like a lot of us didn't start writing our books till we were older than you, Steve.
And there's a difference between start writing and ending up in print. And I think probably for many of us, because I probably started writing about 40 years ago, but they were just stories for my children. That my children didn't find out until years later that I wrote these stories and kind of illustrated them with clip art for them because I was too broke to buy them a lot of other stuff. And so it was like, here, I wrote you a story.
I understand how that goes. You say you're living in Liverpool, Ohio.
East Liverpool, yes, sir.
Yeah. Have you always lived there?
No. Matter of fact, when we went to buy our home here, I had the lady at the bank convinced that I was in the witness protection program, and my wife punched me in the leg and she said, he's a preacher and a liar. But being in ministry, we've lived in Pennsylvania, planted a church in Alabama, ministered in Georgia, West Palm Beach, Florida, up in Illinois, and then about 25 years ago came here and decided to kind of, until retirement time anyways, put down roots and make this home.
Interesting. Yeah, you've kind of been around the country quite a little bit.
A lot of what we've done. One time we planted a church from nothing. The other times I have been with two different denominations, but my role has been going into churches that are on sharp decline, getting them healthy, and then once they're healthy, then I would move on to the next disaster site, and the church would be healthy enough that a pastor could come in and kind of take it from there.
That's you doing all the hard work there.
You know, from college days on, those church planting and church revitalization have just been really the passion for me, and have been blessed to own a company and to do a lot of work in that consulting area as well.
Yeah. They're in either the East Liverpool area or New Brighton. Are there places that you like to go to just kind of meditate, refresh your soul, recharge your batteries?
I do. I love hiking, and so there's some great hiking trails around here. We live close to Beaver Creek State Park, and my wife often tells people that me and the younger woman in my life, who is my German Shepherd, have a couple of off-trail areas that we'd love to just go up to.
Yeah.
We also are blessed. We're actually building a retirement home right now on a farm that we have in South Alabama. It's the farm my wife grew up on. It's only 12 miles off the Gulf of Mexico beaches.
My
And
goodness.
so we will go down there. My one daughter has moved down there already, and so we'll go down there and spend some time. Actually going to be taking a 3-month sabbatical later this year, and we'll probably spend a lot of the time down south for writing.
Yeah. You mentioned your daughter. Do you have other children?
I do. We have 3 adult daughters, and 2 of them live in this area. One of them lives next town down the road from me. One of them lives here in the same town. But our 40-year-old daughter that said she was never going to leave home, the minute she turned 18, said, "Hey, I'm moving to South Alabama and moving in with Grandma." And so she went down there, and then some years later when she was married and they were talking about building a home, she said, "Dad, I don't want to build twice. You've said part of the farm comes to us anyways." And I'm like, yeah. And so we gave her 2 acres, and her husband and son live down there, which gives us a place to crash. We'd had a home until Hurricane Sally, and that's why we're building a new one. Hurricane Sally kind of did away with that.
Gracious. So you have grandchildren then?
I do. Have got a grandson down there in Alabama. My oldest daughter up here has 3 daughters. And so one is 19, one is 18, and the other one is 16, about to turn 17. And then, again, the daughter in Alabama. And then, due to the realities of life with what we were doing, we lived a lot of years with no health insurance. And so there's a big gap between child 2 and child 3. And so our daughter Emily is younger. And so River, who will be here with me after a while today, will be turning 1 in a couple of days. And Evie turned 4 just earlier this week.
So do you ever kid that younger child that she was the insurance child?
Well, here's what it was. I did a stupid thing, Mike, okay? Having 2 daughters in middle school, I should have known better, but I put it to a family vote. I ended up managing a radio station while we were rebuilding a church, and so I had good insurance.
Yeah.
But I also had a good paycheck, and so we were trying to decide which way to go. And so I asked the older 2 girls, "Do you think Mom and I should buy a new camper? And of course we'll need a bigger vehicle to pull it, or should we have another baby?" So I often have looked at my youngest daughter when she was the ornery teenager at times and be like, I could have had a Winnebago, okay? And so that has often been the tease with her.
I just imagine there's all kinds of fun you can have with that.
But I have to tell you, I am blessed. All 3 of them have great men in their lives. All 3 of them are following the Lord, serving Him. You can't ask for any better than that.
Yeah. Now, my favorite line is, if I'd known how much fun grandkids were going to be, I'd have had them first.
Could be some truth to that.
So just a little bit more about who Steve is. Do you have 3 favorite songs?
Wow. Boy, that one's going to press me because I like a variety of types of music. And so I'll be like right now, if I'm at church, I love the elevation worship song, Praise.
Yeah.
But being probably of any of those genres, probably most a country fan. I'm not as young as I once was. Probably resonates a lot right about now. But yeah, I mean, my wife tells me never put the music on scramble because you will get Rolling Stones followed by Frank Sinatra. And so. Yeah.
And that's fair. But just to complicate things, do you have 3 favorite movies?
Now that's an easy one for me. Okay.
Good.
I can definitely do that. Being that one of my other side things is I'm actually president for our family national clan here in the United States, for Clan Forsythe. We are Scottish. And so took 2 of my daughters and did a month-long trip to England and Scotland a few years back.
Wow.
We sat over there and watched Braveheart. So how do you not love Braveheart when you watch it there, okay?
Exactly. Yeah.
And then other than that, my other 2 go back to probably involving my favorite actor. I love Casablanca. I love African Queen. I'm a huge Humphrey Bogart fan.
Yeah. Well, one of my early episodes I think it was my first episode with James Rubart, said, you tell me your 3 favorite movies, and I can tell you the theme of your life. So we'd have to go back to James and ask him. I can't tell you the theme of your life, but I just found that it's interesting to find out what people like as far as music goes and what they like as far as movies, because it gives me some insight into what you like. Well, if you don't mind, I know you're a pastor, but sometimes you have to ask pastors this anyway. Tell us about your walk with Christ.
Sure. I grew up very far from Christ. I grew up with a mother who worked the streets of Pittsburgh as a drug addict and a prostitute.
Oh my!
She started me on drugs intentionally when I was 8, so that I would pass out and she could go work the streets. And so by the time I was 20 years old, I was a mess. I was severely addicted to drugs and alcohol. Wouldn't admit it, though, because I never missed school and I never missed work, and so how that lie goes.
Yeah.
But there were some young people that just wouldn't give up on me, and they kept inviting me to youth events and those things. And so December of 1976, I came home from a youth event, very stoned, very, tried to figure what these kids had that I didn't have. And so December of 1976, just in the bedroom of my home, it was just my dad and I. He had gotten custody of me somewhere along the way. Just poured my heart out to God, and God saved me. It was a bit of a process. I shouldn't admit this because they'll come take my diploma back, but I was halfway through my freshman year before I actually kicked my drug habit at a conservative Bible college.
Yeah.
But I was working at it. But it was not too long after I had accepted Christ that summer that I just felt him saying, okay, you should be dead by the time you're 30 with the life you're living. I want the rest of your life. And that's when I decided to answer the call to go into full-time ministry. Went off to a small private Bible college in Georgia. Wasn't real interested in English class, but I was real interested in this little brunette in the front row. And 2 days ago, we just celebrated our 46th wedding anniversary.
Excellent, excellent. What stood out there is you said you were working at it. And isn't that where we're all at? I mean, if we ever think that we're done working at it, we're lost.
We're in trouble.
Yeah.
And a part of that whole story that I love is my home church, because my dad was involved in church. My dad has always been a godly man. He's with the Lord now. But Dad, when he first got custody of me, it's like, yeah, you'll be in church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, youth group. And they had a men's prayer meeting that at this point now has met every Saturday morning for over 70 years. And there was a man, his name was Bob Jones. He walked into that prayer meeting one day and said, God has told me that we need to pray Steve Forsythe into the ministry. And the pastor, who became a lifelong friend of mine, he said, you mean drug addict Steve Forsythe? And Bob said, listen, all I can tell you is what God's told me to do. We're going to pray him into the ministry, and God will take care of the details.
Wow. What is Jeremiah 29?
I know the plans I have for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful, Steve. And true. For you, for all of us.
Yes, sir.
We have to wake up to that. Oh, well, I could end this interview now.
And I could just leave it on that note. I'm still working on it.
Exactly. I think that's good. On my teleprompter, it says, what sparked your coming to write Christian fiction, and why do you stick with it? I could almost answer that for you, but what's your answer to that?
Yeah, I don't know that I intentionally, with my kids, was writing Christian fiction, although I probably was, because I was thinking of things like helping them deal with fear, helping them deal with disappointment when, a lot of people didn't show up for their birthday parties. And so there was kind of always that underlying Christian theme. The book that I've written, The Staff Maker, actually didn't start out necessarily to be a Christian book. Doing church redevelopment and that I like to do often means I still have to find a way to pay the bills. And so for 13 years, I taught in several school districts. And so I was teaching a class of juniors and seniors called Your Life as Fiction. And it was to teach them how to use real life scenarios, but to write fictional stories about it. And I don't know if they were slow learners or if they just had a horrible teacher, but they weren't getting it. And so I started writing an example for them. And so as I started to write this example for them, it started the life of this character, and I would tell them, okay, this was for real, this was fiction. This is a composite of a group of people. And so finally they started to get it. And I'm like, that's great. And so every Monday morning I used to start off by reading to them what I'd written to kind of as an example. And so I walked into class and I'm like, all right, guys, time to start another week. Open your Chromebooks. Let's get to work. And they're like, wait. What happens with Luke? And I'm like, oh no. I said, that was to convey a message to you. And they're like, no. Okay. They said, you got 1 week. Okay, I'm the teacher. They're like, you got 1 week to bring us the next part of this story. And so I came home and I started, do I just do it, not do it? I mean, I love writing. And then I got realizing God handed me the opportunity to teach these 19 kids some principles that would change their life. And so I started then to interweave 16 key principles into this book that I really just wanted to ingrain into the hearts of these kids, because a lot of them didn't have a male role model. Some of them, there were a couple of them, I'm like, so what are you going to do after high school? And they're like, nothing.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean nothing? They're like, Mr. Forsythe, nobody in my family works. I can't think of a single family member that works. And that's the kind of community that I live in. The largest heroin distribution house is right next to my wife's church, because she pastors a church still here in town. And I mean, but these are the folks that we love, maybe because I was one of those kids.
Yeah.
And so that's when it's like, okay, you know what, if I'm going to put the effort into actually writing a full-blown book, what do these kids need to hear to take with them into life? And so that was the motivation.
Yeah. Surprise. You had been prepared to do that very thing.
We had. Actually, when we first moved to town here 25 years ago, 3 of us were totally insane. We second mortgaged properties we owned. We bought an old nursing home building across from City Hospital and opened a 40-bed inpatient, faith-based, but still state-licensed drug rehab program for teenagers. And so we'd have kids court-ordered to us for a 4 to 6 month stay. And we did that for 8 years until some of the grant funding and that ran out. Became the 5th largest drug rehab for teenagers in Ohio, the only one that would take pregnant girls. And so yeah, I mean, God, every step along the way had been preparing for this moment in time.
Now, that's so alien. How can you care about a girl that is a drug addict and not care about her unborn baby? This is going to comes out as a drug addict.
Well, I won't lie to you. Working with the girls was harder than working with the guys. Okay, it really was. The guys would throw fists and it would be over with.
Yeah.
The girls, it would brew for months. And so a lot of facilities weren't taking girls, but when you added to it the complications then of the medical care for pregnancy and those type things. But again, I mean, does God not have this all worked out? The medical doctor that we use, who's my doctor, plus another doctor who was in my church, and the head of the psychiatric department for the county, all 3 are like rock solid Christians. And so we were able to get them to say, look, this girl may not have state funding, but she'll have care. And so we couldn't have done it without some amazing people that came alongside of us. Yeah.
So as you're writing, was there ever a moment when your faith kind of collided with your writing in a way that changed your story?
Yeah. Because it came down to, how do I instill these principles without sounding so preachy,
so pious,
that it just immediately closes people off? Because I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, I've started some Christian fiction books, and I'm just like, yeah, no, I kind of know where this is going to end. And and they didn't hold my attention. And
Yeah.
I knew with these kids, I mean, they knew where I stood. We'd get into discussions on the Bible in class, and as long as they started the conversation, it's legal. And so it was fine. But how do I convey these things without necessarily coming out saying, yeah, you're messed up, you need Jesus, dude,
Yeah.
And so,
It
did become that conflict. It's like, I wanted to be a little more preachy, but I didn't want to lose the audience.
Trying to write things that someone won't just close the book and said, well, that guy's off. It's very difficult. And, well, my next question is, how do you balance gritty realism with staying true to the gospel? It's just, our biblical standards that we want to involve in our fiction, but we also talk about real life things such as addiction.
Yeah, I think sometimes, at least in my mind, phrasing can become very important. Like, I wanted to tell these kids, I mean, really, guys, look, I can teach you all the right grammar. I can teach you all the ins and outs of writing that you need. But if you don't have Jesus, your life's gonna crash. But how do you say that? And so, in the book, Luke lays out 16, actually, he doesn't lay out, he learns the hard way, 16 principles. But the 13th one is to keep from getting lost. You have to chart your life by the North Star.
Yeah.
With North and Star both capitalized. That then lets you build, into the kids, because they ask questions. What do you mean by North Star?
Yeah.
Obviously, in the context of where you wrote that, you don't mean Polaris up in the sky up there somewhere. What's this North Star thing? And so, like I said, phrasing it in ways that kind of opens the door to then, let the, the secondary character in the book kind of fill in the gaps on some of these things.
Is there biblical truth or passages that anchor the book we're talking about today?
No, probably not.
Because you have 16.
Yeah, and those 16 truths are not necessarily biblical truths. They're just good truths. And so, I would say that no, there's probably not a verse or two that you could jump out at, but more say the overarching principles of the New Testament that are there. Kind of looking at it more as a holistic biblical approach rather than just a few verses. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I mean, that's just the direction we went.
Sure. Well, many of our listeners are looking for books that reach boys, men, or entire families. So I think you've probably covered this, but maybe a little more succinctly, how does your book connect with that audience?
Well, I mean, I think it connects, and I'm going to base this on the fact of the folks that I made read it when it first came out. And so I had 19 kids in the class. The day that it broke on Amazon, 16 copies immediately sold. To which I said, I'm going to find the 3 kids that didn't buy it and failed them. And one of the kids that I was talking to, because I've stayed friends with these kids, one of the kids said, "Oh no, one of them's my sister. We just decided to share a book." I said, "Okay, all right, we can live with that." But I mean, I think the thing that kind of makes it with this universal appeal, having my daughters read it, having, other pastors read it, having these students read it, is the fact that it was written kind of in a fun style. And so, there's a uniqueness to the book that as you're looking to say, what is factual, what is fiction, there are, there's many characters in a book, but there are 2 main characters. And, the reality is the younger rebellious character is me. The wise old man sharing wisdom is me. And the graphic artist that is actually my wife's worship leader, he and I are working on a kid's book together right now, but he came up with his concept for the cover that kind of subliminally worked that idea in, and it was great.
Mm.
But I think that, I think that people can identify with the questions and with the, again, I've been a pastor for 45 years. I have never been a deep theologian. A lot, here's scripture, here's how we make it work. And this book kind of took that here's how we make it work approach. Here's the questions we ask. Here's the doubts we go through. Here's the struggles that we go through. Here is the reality that we all need someone further down the path than us to be speaking truth into our lives. And so, the 16th, the last principle the book lands on is this journey is never complete till you share it with somebody else.
Wow. Yeah.
And, which is discipleship, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that it was done kind of in a storybook fashion. It actually became amazing to me. A large part of it that got written over a summer. We always take a month and go to Alabama. And so I was down there, but we were out there on the farm. It almost seemed like parts of the book were writing itself.
Yeah.
That it's like, I'm not a good typist. I can't hardly keep up with just the way the thoughts were kind of starting to unfold. And so, I think like all authors, but particularly new authors, there is that, is this really worth reading? And so, so I had I've been blessed to be part of a men's group for 25 years, just guys that get together to be guys. Half are Christians, half are not. It's an undercover thing,
Right, I understand.
We're out to lead them to Jesus, but again, I went in with like a stack of papers like this when I printed it off, and I'm like, okay guys, like read through some of this and tell me why I should not publish this.
Yeah.
And the encouragement that they gave, they're like, you might have something here. And the kid's not leaving me alone, even after those kids graduated, because this has been several years back that I had that class. But again, I stay in touch with these kids. They'll show up at my house and be like, hey, we brought some packs of hot dogs and buns, fire up your grill. We're here to visit.
Yeah.
And so I love that relationship with them.
Sure.
But they would be here and be like, hey, we graduated a couple years ago. We're still waiting on the book, okay? When's that going to happen? And I didn't know how to make it happen. But I'm blessed. My worship leader's husband, because he's been on your program. Finally, I went and I'm like, brother, I just need to sit down and talk to you. And he hooked me up with a great editor to work with. But it's like, how do I make this actually come about? And it takes it down to that last principle that I mentioned. He took what he knew, imparted some of that knowledge into me, and let us take the leap. And so, a couple of book clubs have now picked it up to use it. And so,
good.
They haven't told me, halfway through we quit. They're still working through the book. And so I guess that maybe at least it's worth reading for them. It's applying into their lives.
Now, just so our audience knows, in case they missed it, we're talking about the Staff Maker, and I believe the young protagonist's name is Luke.
Yes, Luke Gilmore.
And so he learns 16 principles. I read some reviews. Read them.
Okay.
One person said it's a great story. It says, I can't read my writing. Wonderful storytelling and great life lessons. Helps you to examine your life and how you are living it. And I think that's something we all need. Aristotle or Socrates are one of those people that said an unexamined life is not worth living, which I think is pretty harsh. It suggests doing something other than living, which I'm uncomfortable saying, but we all need to examine our lives. Another review, the title is, You Need to Read This Book. Say it's a great book, really helps a person learn the key principles for success in a fun storytelling fashion. And that person is getting a copy for each of their adult children. So it's interesting how God works things around. I believe you said, Steve, that you didn't really start out to write a Christian fiction book. It was to help students learn how to put their thoughts on paper. So that is it is amazing. I've written a couple books, and I didn't even realize there was a genre called Christian fiction when I wrote it. So I think if you are a Christian, any book you write is going to be a Christian. Any fiction book you write is going to be a Christian fiction. And you can tell a book that's not written by a Christian. An author has a publisher, maybe, but an editor, hopefully, the ARC readers, people that read it. And it tries to satisfy all these things. But a Christian fiction writer has one more authority. Whether he acknowledges it or not, he's confined by it. And you can't be a Christian and write books that don't have Christian principles to them.
I would agree. And even before I knew that this was going to end up being a completed project, there was, if this phrase makes sense, a beautiful heaviness every day with that class, knowing God has entrusted something very precious to me here. He has entrusted me with 19 of these kids.
Yeah.
That what am I going to do with this opportunity? Of course, I viewed that the whole way through school teaching. Just again, God, the way he works it out. When I had my drug center, a guy walked in my door. He said, "I hear you need to hire a teacher. Hire me. I'll be the best teacher you've ever had." Well, he must not have lied, because he went on to be assistant principal at one of the schools that I taught at. Then the school that I primarily taught at, he became the principal, and he's now superintendent of schools.
Wow.
And he would come to me and say things like, "Listen, I know you're not going to break the law, but I know you're going to bend it to look like a pretzel. You're leading kids to the Lord. Would you close your office door so that I don't have the union all over me?" And I'm like, "Yes, sir, not a problem." Yeah. It becomes, what are we entrusted with? And what are we going to do with that? And I think that goes far beyond writing.
Yeah. Oh, it does. It's our everyday life. Was there any part of that book, The Staff Maker, that was difficult to get just like you wanted it?
Yeah, probably the whole thing. But I mean, there was a part, probably about 2/3 of the way in, that I'm like, okay. I mean, I think maybe I've become a little repetitious. I think maybe I've hung out on this point a bit too long, and so I can't even tell you how many times major chunks were rewritten. My favorite key on the computer became delete, and be like, and so I've got a paper threw down here on the floor beside me, just in case I needed it as a reference, of key principles that were going to be in the book that aren't. Where it became you lose the flow with that. And so, I had those type of areas that I had to keep working at, to keep going back to. And then, of course, the age-old question, how do you land this plane?
Yeah.
Where does this book end? And I've had some folks ask me, they're like, "So are you planning a sequel to this book?"
Yeah. And
I've told them, really can't figure out where to go on a sequel, but I've started to outline a little bit of a prequel, maybe leading. I mean, what folks will not know, is that, along with Luke that you had made reference to, is this, this individual that everybody locally knows, but nobody really knows his name, and they call him the Staff Maker. And he's had an impact on more people's lives. And so, I mean, I actually had somebody come to me and say, "Is the Staff Maker really Jesus?" I'm like, no, he's not. Okay. Particularly when I tell them, older, wiser me, they're like, "Oh yeah, that's not Jesus." There's no question on that one. But again, not quite sure where I would go and what might come to mind. But the reality with it is, I haven't ruled out a prequel. So where did the staff maker come from? How did he gain wisdom that allowed him to, in a way? Because Luke, typical of me when I first went off to Bible college, I was so disillusioned. Left a good paying broadcasting job. I'm now at college, and I mean, these folks have become my friends, but not first semester, because they were like way too religious. Because remember, I'm still trying to kick my drug habit that first semester, and so in this book, in the staff maker, Luke is very questioning, why did I even come to this school, and really pushing back, and really looking down on people, and painful to look back at that and say, yeah, first year that was me. And so, school, although it was in Georgia, it was highly represented by folks from Western Pennsylvania, just because of where that denomination had good inroads. Because of that, I would have kids be like, wait a minute, we listened to you on the radio. Wait, we've seen the billboards with your picture on. They're in junky cars. I showed up my brand staying in a college dorm that looked like it was straight out of a prison scene. I was expecting, like Holiday Inn Express at least. So again, I might try to back it up way before Luke ever came on the scene, to be, so what is on this staff maker? Kind of, if you think of the for real classics, okay, kind of like what Tolkien did when he wrote the Silmarillion. Like, okay, here's the story behind the story of where the characters out of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings came from. And so, and so I don't know. Like I said, I've got some other stuff in the work that probably need to take precedence. But I'm taking a 3-month sabbatical primarily for writing. And so we'll see what comes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see what God has in store for you.
Yeah.
But where do you think Christian fiction is short today, if you do think they are, and what are you doing that's different?
Well, I think it's kind of what we'd already talked about.
Yeah.
The two shortcomings I see with Christian fiction is some of it is just way too preachy. And obviously I'm not opposed to preaching. I've been doing it for 45 years, but there's a setting where it just does not work as well. And so to do like a baccalaureate or something at a school, I'm more storytelling and wrapping the storytelling into Jesus. And so I see that. I also see a just so predictable that it's kind of like you're halfway through the book and you're like, okay, so these 3 guys are going to get saved and everybody's going to live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And so, I just see those as some shortcomings. And so, I'm hoping that folks see what I tried to write into this, and that few twists and turns that people maybe didn't see coming. The hardest test of this thing was once it was in print. My wife chose that she was going to wait until this was a finished product. And so we go to bed every night, and my wife would be reading. And, I'll go to bed and read for an hour. And read for like 15 minutes. And so it took her a while to get through this. And I'm laying there trying to act like I'm not paying attention to her, trying to, like, out of the corner, be watching for, like, what's her reaction to this. And then, like, every couple days, I'm picking up her copy of the book, looking to see where the page marker is. Oh, she hasn't got to that yet. Yeah. And so, she has told me. And a couple of things, because again, it is set kind of in our as that scenario thing. She's like, did that really happen? I'm like, no. Okay. I don't remember that person. And I said, they're kind of a composite of those. But she said, there were a couple places I'm like, where's he going on this? And she said, then it was like, you're rounded a okay, the light came on. And so, that was something that I was intentionally shooting for, to try to stay away from the predictability of.
Was a Christian author that helped shape you early on?
Yeah.
No, you okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Reading has always been a thing. My older sister was 13 years older than me, and when life was falling apart, she tried to step in, and her whole thing, biographies and the classics. And I love to tell people this because they think my sister must have been a horrible woman. But if I would read the classics, she bribed me with cigars. And then after people give the shocked look, I'm like, no, they were yellow, they were banana flavored, they were bubble gum. I loved them. And so she would go buy out all the but I mean, so she got me reading, and I read 85 to 120 books a year. Whole thing. I have a book with me everywhere I go. And so, I mean, some of the older classic authors, yes, but if you were to say, like, who's your favorite, it's an individual by the name of Andy Andrews. And Andy Andrews has tried his hand at comedy. He has been a motivational speaker for a lot of. He wrote some books that I probably stole his style from a bit. He wrote a book called The Noticer, and then later The Noticer Returns. And in it, again, it is Christian. I mean, the man, I've listened to him preach in a couple of churches as well. So, I mean, he's solidly biblically. His books are moral, biblical truth, very cleverly disguised.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. As a matter of fact, he makes his home down on the beach on an exclusive island that the rest of us can't afford to get to. But as far as connect, my daughter had his son when she taught preschool down there. And so one of my goals when I moved down there, when we outright, we're going to keep the house here, we're going to do both locations. But when I'm down there is to try to connect with him. He has a museum and a studio where interviews and everything. Yeah. And I want to drop off a copy of the book and say, I'm not looking for promotion. I just want you to know you influenced in this book, and I'd love to have coffee with you someday. And
that'd be great.
Whether it'll happen or not, I don't know, but hopefully down there can kind of help make that come about.
It could when this podcast is just overwhelming the world. And to pick up, I think you will probably be episode 18, 19, somewhere in there.
And absolutely never know.
You don't.
Because again, I mean, so many of the folks that I know, like really random chance encounters.
Yeah.
And I think of some non-Christian authors that to me, one of them, we were the only two people staying at the same hotel, and so we ended up in the hot tub together. And it was one of those things that we just sat and talked for hours that I don't know that I ever could have gotten FaceTime with.
Yeah.
But,
so you talked to him until you both turned to prunes.
Well, we actually ended up leaving and going on up to my hotel room, and again spending hours just because we found that we'd had some contacts back and forth. And so like I said, life has been full of so many of those that I know I'm to promote this not just my interview with this, but I mean, this is a great program you do. And so, you never know who's going to see it, Mike.
Do you feel that God's taught you a lesson because you're writing? So, like, through your writing, used that, what you were trying to accomplish to teach you a lesson?
Yes. A painful one. Because I looked at some of this when it was in the earlier forms, and like I said, I mean, I show up kind of as two characters, and I look at Luke really is in some ways like what I was in college. He really had some come off, and then, I mean, as God often does, he spoke to a friend of mine saying, he needs to still be had come to realize that that there was still some areas of arrogance that needed to be dealt with, of being gentler maybe with people than what I had, and so my own really spoke to me about saying, still not everything you need to be, or back to where we started. this growing, this becoming, this whole process. But I came to realize there was still too much in me to be completely the reflection that I wanted to be. And so, on some of that, buddy. Still working on some of that. But it made me make
Well, do you have one sentence to a skeptical man to read your book?
You will think you never knew you should have thought of and say, this really could change my life. There would be my sentence.
Yeah. Excellent. Steve, I have really enjoyed this discussion, and I think we could just keep on, but it just means it'd make my editing a lot.
Well, Mike, I appreciate your time. I again appreciate the open door to be able to share the story behind the story.
Would you mind if
I would love that.
Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the opportunity you have given me to talk to people like Steve. And thank you for the Christian fiction authors that have taken their faith and put it down on as he mentioned, Principle 16, that it's not with others. So Lord, we just thank you for the work that Steve does. Encourage him, emboldened to say what he knows he needs to. And Lord, we just give you all the thanks and the praise. We ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you, my friend.
Following your work and see how things turn out for you. So
all right.
You have a good day. It always sounds it's hard to end an interview. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. And if it wasn't for you authors, I would not. Anyway, God bless you. May He spread His grace over you. Go forth and do great things. Thanks for spending us on the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. Enjoyed meeting today's author and learning more about his work. If you're check out his books. And if you grab, please be kind and leave a review. It really makes a difference. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show. Feedback, favorite moments, if there was anything that the author inspired you or gave you pause. I'd love to hear it. I'd like to remind you to hit that if you're rooting for this podcast. I know. Until next time, may God's grace overflow in your life. Stay inspired. And as always, keep. This is Mike Baines, signing out.